Greetings everyone, Zach here for another video on alchemy. Today I'll be discussing yin and yang energy. So a lot of people hear yin and yang and a lot of people use these terms regularly in the Western world, but I think that most of everyone lacks an understanding of what these energies really represent. So hopefully I can help everyone to integrate that understanding of what they really mean. Yin and Yang are primordial energies, which mean they are at the root of all occurrence. I believe a good comparison in our modern paradigm would be computers and technology. The binary system in computers is 1 and 0, and all functions in a computer are made up of combinations of 1 and 0 in terms of the programming. So too, in reality, are all things made up of yin and yang in different balances and different proportions and in layers. One situation might seem dominant in yin, but if you look at it a different way, it's dominant in yang, and these different layers play off of each other in another dynamic energy balance. So it's kind of a complex topic, but I hope that it can be simplified to some degree through this. So the symbol of yin, the yin yang, we've all seen that. And as a child, I remember seeing it in sticker vending machines, and I always thought it was like the coolest thing ever. Then as I grew older, I just kind of identified it as a cliche symbol because I didn't understand the meaning. And really only in the past 5 or 10 years or so have I really started to understand the meaning of it. People often refer to it as being good and evil, and you can look at that as one angle of it. But the yin-yang symbol is actually extremely profound the more that you investigate it, and because I believe it shows multiple dimensions of energy play. And I drew a little diagram to help explain this. So here we go. Here you can see the yin-yang. Oh, I'm going to get a good angle here. All right. The yin-yang as a whole. As a connected pattern, it represents oneness, and all the functions of yin and yang are held within the one symbol. When we go to the next level, you can see that it is made up of two halves. This is showing the dualistic polarities of reality. If you go to the next level of it, we're looking at the function of the dot and the composition of each of the halves, essentially. The dot represents the integral connectedness of opposites, as well as the fact that the dot occurs on the large side of it. It also shows that the opposites are connected at their peaks. Then going back to the full picture of it, we can see that it is a diagram of the flow of energy. It shows the dynamic flow. So as the black being yin, yin starts out and then it rises to its peak. And at the peak of yin, that's when yang appears. And then yang rises, and at the peak of yang, yin appears. This function is inherent in all aspects of reality. There are always polarities, and the polarities are always connected, and they rise towards one another. Change is always inherent. Things are always changing and growing. And although the form of those changes, the pattern of change itself is consistent. And yin and yang will represent themselves in a number of forms, but as primordial roots, they are consistent. Similar to plants, I think. Plants have roots. So if we just looked at the root structure, everything is generally the same. There's something grounding them into the earth. But the forms that come up, what we see with our eyes looking at the land, it's so different and unique for each one. I mean, of course, root structures are different, but in terms of the metaphor, everything is connected and grounded in with that primordial connectedness to reality. But then the forms are always unique. So what this question brought to mind for me is, does this mean that everything is the same and we're just stuck in this whirlwind of continuity? And to answer that, I think is a little bit complex. It's somewhat yes and somewhat no. We are always bound to the patterns of change. We're always bound to the flow of yin and yang energy. But while this change is constant, the forms that the yin and yang are represented in change. So I think that another good comparison to think of when we look at yin and yang changing through time is like a wave pattern. The wave always has a crest at the top and a peak at the bottom, but the wave itself could be moving in different directions. And I've got a little diagram to show that as well. This is yin and yang as wave patterns. Here we can see yang and yin as being the peak of the up and the down, but we can also see that waves through time could be traveling up or down. Now, what do the different axes represent? I guess the x-axis would be time. The y-axis, I don't really want to identify it because I don't want to say good or bad or harmony and disharmony. I think that's going to kind of make it more objective than it really should be. But the reason why I reference this is in relation to alchemy. We sometimes have patterns in our lives which are consistent and they keep going on the same way. But as we interact with the equation of our lives, with the formula that we've been discussing through these videos, we change the direction of this wave pattern. And just like in life, we have, days that we find better and worse. And that's always going to occur. We're going to have things that are more enjoyable and less enjoyable through time. But depending on what we're doing with our lives, depending on the direction that our energy flow is going in, the good days and the bad days represent in different ways. If we are moving our life equation in a way which is pursuing harmony, we will find the good days particularly enjoyable and the bad days a little bit less harsh. So I think that it's really important for us to understand how we can change this energy flow. So I wrote down a few examples of how yin and yang represent themselves, because this is still pretty abstract just as an energy idea. So let's look at some of the applications of it. So some of the phrases and ideas that can be used to understand yin and yang are yin being flexible and yang being firm, yin being emptiness, yang being full, yin being open, yang being closed, softness and ruggedness, silence and expressiveness, stillness, activity, passiveness, assertiveness, flowing, grounded, and then spontaneity and structure. The other important aspect of yin and yang is to understand that for any pattern to be in harmony, there must be a balance of the two. And in our lives, things that cause pain and struggle are generally, if not always, imbalances of yin and yang energy. So let's look at some active examples of yin and yang, and then we'll look at some examples of what it looks like for them to be out of balance. So listening and speaking. So in a conversation, if we're only listening and not speaking, yeah, we're learning a lot, but we're not really contributing to the energy. If we're always talking and we're never listening, then that's imbalance as well. Then it's potentially arrogant, and it really just is not courteous. Sleep and wake. If we are always sleeping and never doing anything when we're awake, we're not going to accomplish much, and that can lead to apathy and general unhappiness in our lives. But if we're always waking and we're never sleeping, we're exhausted and we're not able to really function at our maximum. When sleeping and waking are in a dynamic balance, then we are able to achieve the most with our waking time, as well as be satisfied with the amount of rest that we're getting. Inhale and exhale. That one is pretty obvious. We have to draw in oxygen, and then we have to exhale the carbon dioxide, and too much oxygen isn't good, too little oxygen isn't good. So our breath is one of the constant cycles of yin and yang. Night and day is another one. This isn't something we can change, obviously, but I think it's another good example that we can see around us. Also, winter and summer. Nature has all these yin and yang cycles, and they're like a clock. They're an energetic clock. I drew a diagram a few years ago showing the what I call the eternity clock, just showing how yin and yang cycles overlap. I'll probably go over that in a future video, but I don't want this one to be too overwhelming, really. Let's go over a couple more of how the balance of yin and yang is important, and then we'll bring this to a close. I think that spontaneity and structure is a really cool one to consider. When we're walking around and living our lives, if we are not spontaneous enough, we miss the opportunity to take on and experience beautiful things that might not be a part of our agenda or our structure. But if we're only spontaneous and we're lacking any structure, we've run the risk of not achieving goals and also lacking discipline. Discipline and reward is another good one. If we're only disciplined and we're never rewarding ourselves, our lives lack fulfillment and enjoyment. But if we're focused only on rewarding ourselves and we're lacking discipline, the reward loses its splendor. So, as you can see, these different yin and yang qualities are inherent all around us. In the last two videos, I was talking about supplementing stillness and silence, and I intentionally kept the phrase yin and yang out of the primary focus because I wanted people to be able to receive those ideas intuitively and emotionally and just experience it without applying too much intellectual construct. The reason why is because intelligence in the active part of the mind is yang, where receptivity and wisdom, or actually wisdom's yang, sorry. Receptivity, though, and intuition are our yin aspects of being able to be receptive. So I wanted everyone to experience the stillness supplement, experience the lesson of stillness supplement from yin energy. Coming up in the videos, I'm going to be focusing on yang energy and assertive supplements. And because of that, I felt the necessary center point of those balances, the center of the infinity, would be an explanation of yin and yang energy. So the topic of yin and yang is far greater than can be discussed in one video. I am just really scratching the surface here because if I go much deeper than this, it's going to be an extremely long video, and it's also going to run the risk of not being fully absorbed and integrated. So we'll come back to this topic, but I think a final note to point out is that the function of yin and yang in alchemy, it becomes very inherent when we consider that all aspects of our life are comprised of yin and yang energy. And if we understand that the yin and yang energy has to be in a balance, and if we understand the essence of yin and yang, then we can understand how to complement situations and create a balance. So yin and yang is almost like a measuring stick. If we understand how it works, we can apply that understanding to measure situations or measure aspects of ourselves and see where we might be lacking in yin or yang. So I think that is enough for now, and we'll go into some yang energy in the coming videos. Blessings to you all.